In a quiet little town surrounded by green hills and thick woods, life moved at its own unhurried pace. The people there were friendly for the most part, always eager to chat about the weather or share news about who was doing what. But like any place, it had its share of flaws. Gossip traveled faster than wildfire, and some folks weren't as kind as they pretended to be. One such person was a woman in her mid-30s who worked at the local library. She wasn't loud or flashy. Instead, she preferred spending her days organizing books and helping kids find stories that would light up their imaginations. Her name isn't important here. What mattered was how she carried herself with quiet dignity. To many, she seemed like just another face in the crowd, someone easy to overlook. What no one realized, though, was that this unassuming woman was married to the governor of the state. They kept their relationship private because they wanted a normal life without constant attention. Every evening after finishing work, she liked to take long walks around the neighborhood. It gave her time to think, breathe fresh air, and enjoy the peacefulness of the town. One day, while passing by the fire station, she overheard laughter coming from inside. At first, she didn't pay much attention. It sounded like typical banter among co-workers. But then, something caught her ear. A voice said, "There goes the bookworm again, always hiding behind those glasses and boring books." Another chimed in, "Yeah, bet she doesn't even know how to have fun." Her steps faltered for a moment. She recognized the tone immediately. It was mockery, plain and simple. Part of her wanted to march right in and confront them, but she decided against it. Experience had taught her that sometimes ignoring negativity was better than engaging with it. So she continued walking, hoping it was just a harmless joke that wouldn't go any further. But the teasing didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. Small notes began appearing under her door or tucked under her car's windshield wipers. Written in messy handwriting, the messages mocked everything from her clothes to her job. Some read, "Why don't you try smiling once in a while?" Others were meaner. "No wonder you're alone all the time." At first, she thought it might be kids playing pranks, but soon enough, she noticed similarities between the handwriting on the notes and graffiti scribbled near the fire station. It didn't take long for her to connect the dots. The bullying was coming from the same group of firefighters. Feeling hurt and increasingly isolated, she confided in her closest friend, a neighbor named Lisa. Sitting in her cozy living room, sipping tea, she explained what had been happening. Lisa listened intently, her brow furrowing with concern. "You need to report this," Lisa urged. "Nobody should have to deal with this kind of harassment." But the librarian hesitated. Reporting it meant drawing attention to herself and possibly revealing her connection to the governor. She didn't want to make things worse than they already were. Despite her efforts to ignore the situation, the bullying gnawed at her confidence. Each note felt like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. She started taking different routes during her evening walks to avoid passing the fire station. Yet, no matter how hard she tried to stay out of sight, the cruel words followed her. They seeped into her thoughts, making her question whether there was truth to what they said. Was she really too quiet? Too dull? Too invisible? Unbeknownst to her, her husband, a man trusted with leading an entire state, was miles away in the capital city, dealing with his own set of challenges. He hadn't noticed anything unusual during their phone calls, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was a distance in her voice, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. When he asked if everything was okay, she brushed it off, saying work had been stressful lately. Little did he know, the real source of her stress was closer to home than he could imagine. Back in the town, tensions simmered beneath the surface. The firefighters carried on with their daily routines, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. And the librarian? She kept her head down, trying to focus on her work and the joy it brought her. But deep down, she knew something would have to give eventually. Life has a way of forcing change when we least expect it. And for her, that moment was fast approaching. As the days passed, the town remained blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding within its borders. But fate has a habit of intervening when we least anticipate it. For better or worse, the stage was set for an event that would turn lives upside down and reveal hidden truths that couldn't stay buried forever. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, one of those days where the sky was a perfect shade of blue and the air carried the faint scent of blooming flowers. The librarian had spent her morning shelving books and helping a group of children pick out stories for their school project. She felt a sense of satisfaction in her work, knowing she was making a small difference in the lives of others. But as she stepped outside during her lunch break, the weight of the bullying returned like a shadow creeping over her. She decided to take a different route back to the library, avoiding the main street where the fire station stood. Still, she couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. As she passed by a narrow alleyway, she noticed a figure leaning against the wall, a firefighter she recognized from the station. He smirked as she walked by, his eyes lingering on her with a mix of mockery and arrogance. "Still hiding behind your books?" he called out, loud enough for a few passers-by to hear. Her cheeks flushed red, but she kept walking, pretending not to hear him. That evening, she found another note tucked under her windshield wiper. This one read, "You'll never fit in here." The words hit harder than usual. It wasn't just the cruelty, it was the truth buried beneath it. No matter how hard she tried, she always felt like an outsider in this town. The thought gnawed at her as she sat alone in her living room, staring at the note. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry, letting the tears flow freely. She felt trapped, unsure of what to do next. Her husband, meanwhile, was hundreds of miles away in the state capital, attending meetings and signing legislation. On the surface, he seemed focused and composed, but inside, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. His wife had always been strong, resilient even, but lately there was a fragility in her voice whenever they spoke. He chalked it up to stress from work, telling himself it would pass. But deep down, he knew better. He trusted her judgment, but he also worried about the life they chose, one where they kept their marriage private to avoid attention. One night, after a particularly long day, he picked up his phone to call her. The conversation started off normally, with her asking about his schedule and him sharing a funny story about a clumsy intern who spilled coffee on some important documents. But when he asked how she was doing, her response was vague. "I'm fine," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "Just tired." He pressed further, sensing she wasn't telling the whole truth. "Are you sure? You sound distant." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a soft sigh. "It's nothing," she replied. "Just work stuff." He let it drop, but the unease lingered. That night, as he lay in bed, he replayed their conversation in his mind. Something wasn't adding up. His wife wasn't the type to be bothered by work stuff. She thrived in her role at the library, finding joy in connecting people with books and ideas. So why did she sound so defeated? He resolved to visit her sooner rather than later, even if it meant rearranging his packed schedule. Back in the town, the tension continued to build. The firefighters went about their daily routines, oblivious to the impact their actions were having. To them, teasing the quiet librarian was just harmless fun, a way to pass the time between calls. They didn't realize the cumulative effect of their words and actions, how each insult chipped away at her confidence and sense of belonging, and they certainly didn't know the identity of her husband, whose influence reached far beyond the borders of their sleepy little town. One fateful afternoon, the unthinkable happened. A fire broke out in an abandoned building downtown, sending thick plumes of smoke spiraling into the sky. Sirens blared as the fire truck sped toward the scene, drawing a crowd of curious onlookers. Among them was the librarian, who had been driving home from work when she saw the commotion. At first, she considered turning around and heading home, but something compelled her to stay. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was a subconscious desire to see the firefighters in action, the very people who had made her life miserable for weeks. As she parked her car and joined the growing crowd, she spotted one of the bullies standing near the fire truck. He was grinning, clearly relishing the attention as cameras flashed and reporters jotted down notes. The sight filled her with a mixture of anger and sadness. How could someone so careless with words be entrusted with protecting lives? She clenched her fists, trying to push the thought aside, but it lingered like a bitter taste in her mouth. Suddenly, chaos erupted. An explosion rocked the building, sending debris flying in all directions. People screamed and scattered, panic spreading like wildfire. Through the confusion, the librarian remained frozen, her eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before her. Several firefighters were trapped inside, unable to escape due to falling rubble. Others rushed to help, but fear paralyzed many, leaving them unsure of what to do. That's when she snapped into action. Without thinking twice, she grabbed a nearby megaphone and began directing the crowd, urging them to move back to safety. Her calm demeanor cut through the hysteria, giving people a sense of order amid the chaos. Then, spotting a young firefighter struggling to free himself from a pile of debris, she ran toward him without hesitation. Ignoring the danger, she pulled him to safety just moments before another section of the building collapsed. Breathing heavily, she looked around at the stunned faces of the onlookers. Some clapped, while others simply stared in disbelief. Even the arrogant firefighter who had mocked her earlier stood silently, his expression a mixture of shame and awe. In that moment, everything changed, not just for her, but for everyone who witnessed her bravery. What started as a cruel joke had transformed into a lesson none of them would soon forget. As the dust settled and the emergency crews took control of the situation, the townspeople gathered around her, thanking her for her quick thinking and courage. Someone handed her a bottle of water, while another patted her on the back. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen, not as a target for ridicule, but as a person capable of making a difference. And though she didn't realize it yet, her act of heroism was about to change more than just the way people viewed her. It would expose secrets, challenge assumptions, and force the entire town to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. The aftermath of the fire left the town buzzing with a mix of shock and admiration. News of the librarian's bravery spread quickly, passing from one person to another like wildfire. People who had barely noticed her before were now stopping her on the street to thank her. Shopkeepers waved at her through their windows, and even strangers approached her in the grocery store to express their gratitude. For someone who had spent weeks feeling invisible or worse, targeted, this sudden attention was overwhelming. She tried to brush it off, insisting she'd only done what anyone else would have done in that situation. But deep down, she couldn't deny the sense of pride swelling inside her. Saving that young firefighter wasn't just about helping someone in need, it was about proving something to herself. All those cruel jokes, the notes, the constant belittling, they had made her feel small and powerless. Yet when it mattered most, she hadn't hesitated. She had acted with courage and clarity, showing everyone exactly who she was beneath the quiet exterior. Still, not everyone reacted kindly to her newfound fame. The firefighters, especially the ones who had mocked her, struggled to process what had happened. Their leader, the same man who had teased her relentlessly, couldn't meet her eyes when they crossed paths at the station later that week. He muttered an awkward apology, but his words felt hollow. It was clear he didn't know how to handle the weight of his guilt. Others avoided her altogether, pretending not to see her as she walked by. They weren't used to seeing her in a different light, and it unsettled them. Meanwhile, photos and videos of the rescue went viral online. Social media lit up with posts praising the hero librarian who had risked her life to save others. Local news outlets picked up the story, running headlines like "Quiet Hero Emerges from Chaos" and "Small-Town Librarian Becomes Unexpected Savior." Reporters began calling the library, hoping to interview her, but she politely declined. She didn't want the attention. All she wanted was to move forward and leave the negativity behind. Her husband, still in the capital city, saw the headlines during a break between meetings. At first, he thought it was some kind of mistake. His wife, a hero. The idea seemed surreal, yet undeniably exciting. He scrolled through article after article, each one painting a picture of her bravery and quick thinking. Pride swelled in his chest, but so did concern. Something about the tone of the stories tugged at him, hinting at a deeper context he didn't fully understand. Why hadn't she told him about any of this? That evening, unable to wait any longer, he called her. Her voice sounded tired but steady when she answered. "Hey," she said softly, as if sensing the question already forming on his lips. Before he could speak, she sighed and admitted, "I guess you've seen the news." He nodded, forgetting for a moment that she couldn't see him. "Yeah, I have," he replied. "What happened? Are you okay?" For the first time since the bullying began, she opened up to him completely. Sitting in the quiet comfort of their living room, she recounted everything: the notes, the insults, the way she had been treated by the very people meant to protect the community. Her voice trembled at times, but she didn't stop. She told him about the explosion, the chaos, and how she had stepped in without thinking twice. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her face, but there was also a sense of relief. She had carried the burden alone for too long, and finally sharing it felt like lifting a heavy weight off her shoulders. Her husband listened intently, his jaw tightening with every word. Anger simmered beneath the surface, though he kept it in check for her sake. When she finished, he took a deep breath and said firmly, "You shouldn't have had to go through that. No one should." Then, after a pause, he added, "We're going to fix this." The next morning, he made arrangements to return home earlier than planned. As the governor, he knew his presence would send a strong message, not just to the townspeople, but to the entire state. He arrived late that night, finding her curled up on the couch with a cup of tea. Despite her exhaustion, she managed a small smile when she saw him. "You didn't have to come back," she said quietly. He shook his head, pulling her into a tight hug. "Of course I did. You're my family, and I'm here for you." Over the next few days, they talked extensively about what to do next. She was hesitant at first, worried about causing more trouble or drawing unnecessary attention to their private lives. But he gently reminded her that staying silent wouldn't solve anything. "This isn't just about us," he explained. "It's about standing up for what's right. If we let this slide, it sends a message that bullying is okay, that cruelty can go unchecked, and I won't stand for that." With her reluctant agreement, he scheduled a press conference to address the issue publicly. Word spread quickly, and soon the entire town gathered outside the local community center, eager to hear what the governor had to say. Cameras rolled as he stepped onto the makeshift stage, his wife standing beside him. For the first time, the truth came out. He revealed their marriage to the crowd, explaining why they had chosen to keep it private. Then he spoke directly to the firefighters involved in the harassment. "Harassment has no place in our society," he declared, his voice firm but measured. "It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. No one deserves to be treated with such disrespect. What happened to my wife is unacceptable, and it needs to stop. Accountability starts today." His words sent shockwaves through the audience. Some clapped while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The firefighters sat near the front, their faces pale with realization. They hadn't known they were mocking the governor's wife, but now it didn't matter. Their actions spoke for themselves, and the consequences were inevitable. In the days that followed, the fire department underwent significant changes. Training programs focused on respect and accountability were implemented, and disciplinary measures were taken against those responsible for the bullying. The leader of the group, the one who had tormented her the most, was suspended indefinitely. Though harsh, the punishment served as a reminder that no one, regardless of their position, was above reproach. As for the librarian, life slowly began to return to normal, or at least a new version of it. People continued to praise her bravery, but she remained humble, deflecting compliments whenever possible. She returned to work at the library, finding joy once again in connecting readers with stories that inspired hope and resilience. And though the scars of the past lingered, she carried them with grace, knowing she had overcome something far greater than she ever imagined. Her husband, too, found renewed purpose in his role as governor. He championed initiatives aimed at preventing workplace harassment and promoting kindness within communities. Together, they proved that even in the face of adversity, compassion and integrity could shine through. The small-town librarian and the governor may have started as unlikely heroes, But their story became a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. The press conference was a turning point, not just for the town but for the librarian and her husband as well. Standing on that stage, side by side, they became more than individuals. They were a united front against injustice. The governor's words echoed through the crowd, leaving some people nodding in agreement, others squirming in discomfort, and a few openly whispering among themselves. For the first time, the full weight of what had happened came into focus. It wasn't just about one woman being bullied. It was about how easily cruelty could slip under the radar when no one spoke up. When the governor introduced his wife, explaining their decision to keep their marriage private, there was a collective gasp from the audience. Many hadn't realized she was connected to such a powerful figure. Some felt embarrassed for having judged her so harshly, while others scrambled to process this revelation. But as she stood there calm and composed despite everything she'd endured, it became clear that her strength wasn't tied to her title or connections. She was extraordinary because of who she was, a person willing to step up when it mattered most. After the press conference ended, reporters swarmed around them, firing questions left and right. "How does it feel to be married to the governor?" one asked. Another chimed in, "Did you know your husband would intervene like this?" She answered each question honestly but briefly, making sure the spotlight stayed where it belonged, on the bigger issue at hand. This wasn't about her personal life. It was about addressing the culture of bullying and disrespect that had festered unchecked for far too long. Back home later that evening, the two of them sat together in silence, reflecting on the day's events. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a mix of exhaustion and relief. She leaned her head on his shoulder, letting out a deep sigh. "Do you think it'll make a difference?" she asked softly. He wrapped an arm around her and nodded. "It has to," he replied. "If not for us, then for everyone else who might be going through something similar." Over the next few weeks, the fire department underwent sweeping changes. New policies were implemented to ensure accountability, including mandatory training sessions on workplace behavior and respect. Anonymous reporting systems were set up so employees could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. The firefighters involved in the harassment faced consequences ranging from suspensions to transfers, depending on the severity of their actions. While some grumbled about the measures being too harsh, others admitted in private that perhaps they'd let things slide for too long. For the leader of the group, the man who had mocked her relentlessly, the punishment hit hardest. Suspended. Indefinitely, he spent days locked inside his house, replaying the events in his mind. At first, he blamed himself for getting caught, furious that his career had been derailed over a few jokes. But as time passed, he began to see the bigger picture. Those jokes weren't harmless banter. They were weapons that had hurt someone deeply. Slowly, guilt replaced anger, and he started questioning the kind of person he wanted to be moving forward. Meanwhile, the townspeople reacted in different ways. Some rallied around the librarian, offering support and apologizing for not noticing the bullying sooner. Others distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the idea that their idyllic little town wasn't as perfect as they'd believed. Conversations shifted at coffee shops and grocery stores, with people debating whether the punishments were fair or if the whole situation had been blown out of proportion. Yet, amid the divisiveness, a quiet change began to take root. People started paying closer attention to their words, their actions, and the impact they had on those around them. At the library, life returned to its usual rhythm, though with subtle differences. Kids still ran excitedly to the shelves, searching for their favorite books, and adults browsed quietly during lunch breaks. But now, strangers stopped by just to thank her for inspiring them. One elderly woman even brought her a bouquet of wildflowers, saying simply, "You reminded me that kindness matters." These small gestures meant the world to her, filling the cracks left behind by months of negativity. Her husband, meanwhile, threw himself into his work with renewed energy. As governor, he used his platform to advocate for anti-bullying initiatives across the state. He visited schools, workplaces, and community centers, sharing stories about resilience and empathy. His message was simple: Everyone deserves to feel safe and valued regardless of who they are or where they come from. Though his schedule grew busier than ever, he made sure to carve out time for his wife, knowing how much she needed him during this transition. Despite all the progress, healing wasn't linear. There were moments when old insecurities crept back in, reminding her of the cruel notes and mocking laughter. On tough days, she found solace in writing letters to herself, words of encouragement and reminders of her worth. Other times she turned to Lisa, her trusted friend, who never failed to lift her spirits with a warm cup of tea and heartfelt advice. Together, they navigated the highs and lows, celebrating victories big and small. As spring gave way to summer, the town began to transform in subtle yet meaningful ways. Neighbors greeted each other more warmly, and conversations at the local diner carried less judgment and more understanding. Even the firefighters, once brash and unapologetic, started showing signs of growth. They attended the training sessions, with open minds, learning to treat one another, and the community, with greater respect. Though rebuilding trust would take time, the seeds of change had been planted. One sunny afternoon, the librarian decided to revisit the spot where the fire had occurred. The abandoned building had been demolished, leaving behind an empty lot filled with weeds and rubble. Standing there, she felt a strange sense of closure. The explosion had been chaotic and terrifying, but it had also sparked something beautiful, a chance for redemption, both for herself and for the people around her. She smiled faintly, imagining what might eventually rise from the ashes. A park, perhaps, or a community garden. Something vibrant and full of life. Walking back toward her car, she noticed a familiar face approaching. It was the firefighter, who had led the bullying campaign. He hesitated for a moment before speaking, his voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted to say, sorry, he stammered. Not because I have to, but because I mean it. What we did was wrong, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Tears welled up in his eyes as he added, You didn't deserve any of it. She studied him for a long moment, seeing not the arrogant man who had tormented her, but someone trying to make amends. Finally, she nodded. Thank you, she said simply. That means a lot. They parted ways shortly after, but the encounter stayed with her. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it was necessary for her own peace of mind and for the sake of moving forward. By the end of summer, the town felt different, not perfect, but better. Conversations flowed more freely, and smiles seemed genuine rather than forced. The librarian continued her work at the library, finding joy in connecting people with stories that inspired hope and courage. Her husband remained steadfast in his mission to promote kindness and accountability, using their shared experience as a reminder of what was possible when people chose to stand up for what's right. Together, they proved that even in the darkest moments, light could break through. Their journey from pain to resilience, from silence to action, became a testament to the power of integrity and compassion. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, they faced them with unwavering determination, knowing they had already overcome the impossible. As the seasons changed and autumn painted the town in shades of gold and crimson, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The scars of the past hadn't disappeared. They never truly would. But they had softened, becoming part of the story rather than the whole picture. For the librarian, each day brought small victories. A child's laughter as she found the perfect book, a neighbor's wave from across the street, or even just the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd made it through another morning without letting fear take hold. Her husband, too, carried on with his duties as governor, but he approached them differently now. Before, his role had felt like a series of obligations, signing papers, attending meetings, giving speeches. Now every decision he made was infused with purpose. He thought about the people behind the policies, the faces that might benefit from change, or suffer if nothing improved. His wife's experience had taught him something invaluable. Leadership wasn't just about authority, it was about empathy. And so, He worked tirelessly to create programs that fostered respect and kindness, both within workplaces and communities. The fire department became a focal point for these efforts. Under new management, the station transformed into a place where teamwork and mutual respect took center stage. Training sessions weren't just about physical drills anymore. They included discussions on mental health, communication, and conflict resolution. Some firefighters initially resisted the changes, grumbling about touchy-feely nonsense, but over time attitudes shifted. They realized that treating one another well didn't weaken them. It strengthened their bonds and made them better at their jobs. One evening, during a community event held at the local park, the librarian found herself sitting beside the firefighter who had once mocked her. He sat awkwardly, fidgeting with his hands, clearly unsure of how to act around her. She noticed but said nothing, letting him decide whether to speak. After a long pause, he cleared his throat and said quietly, "I've been thinking. I owe you more than an apology." She turned to look at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" she asked. He hesitated before continuing. "You saved my friend's life that day. If it hadn't been for you, he wouldn't have made it out alive. And yet all I ever did was make fun of you. I don't know how to fix what I did, but I want to try. Maybe I can volunteer at the library or help kids learn about fire safety. Something to give back." For a moment, she didn't respond. His words caught her off guard, not because of their sincerity, but because they came from someone she'd written off as irredeemable. Yet here he was, humbled and willing to change. Finally, she nodded. "That sounds like a good start," she said softly. "We could use volunteers, especially ones who care about teaching others." His relief was palpable. And though their conversation remained brief, it marked the beginning of something unexpected. A fragile bridge between two people who had once stood on opposite sides. Over the following weeks, he kept his promise, showing up at the library after his shifts to assist with reading programs and workshops. At first, the kids were hesitant, whispering among themselves about the mean guy from the fire station. But as they saw him interact with patience and warmth, their perceptions began to shift. Even the librarian couldn't deny the progress. He wasn't the same person he'd been months ago. While forgiveness didn't come easily, it grew bit by bit, nurtured by actions rather than words. Seeing him work alongside her, helping children discover the joy of storytelling, reminded her that everyone deserved a second chance, even those who had hurt her deeply. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to move forward, together. Back at home, the couple continued navigating their own journey. Their relationship had always been strong, but the ordeal had tested it in ways neither had anticipated. There were nights when she struggled to sleep, haunted by memories of the bullying. On those occasions, her husband stayed awake with her, holding her hand and reminding her of her strength. Other times, he encouraged her to write down her thoughts, believing that putting feelings into words could help heal old wounds. Together, they learned to lean on each other, not as crutches but as partners sharing the weight of challenges. Their bond inspired others in ways they hadn't expected. Friends and neighbors often remarked on how they handled adversity with grace and determination. One couple, whose marriage had been strained by years of misunderstandings, confided in them about their struggles. Drawing courage from the librarian and her husband's example, they decided to seek counseling and work toward reconciliation. Another family, dealing with a teenager being bullied at school, reached out for advice on how to address the issue without escalating tensions. Each interaction reinforced the idea that resilience wasn't just personal, it rippled outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict. By winter, the town buzzed with preparations for the annual holiday festival. Streets were adorned with twinkling lights and shop windows displayed festive decorations. The library hosted a special event called Stories by the Fire, inviting families to gather around a cozy fireplace while the librarian read classic tales of adventure and hope. To everyone's surprise, the former bully-turned-volunteer joined in, dressed in full firefighter gear to talk about safety tips during the colder months. Children giggled as he demonstrated how to properly use a space heater, and parents exchanged approving glances, impressed by the transformation they witnessed. Even the governor attended, taking a rare break from his hectic schedule to support his wife's efforts. As he watched her interact with the crowd, her face glowing with happiness, he felt an overwhelming sense of pride. This woman, his partner, his rock, had weathered storms most would find unbearable. Yet she emerged stronger and wiser. Her quiet courage had not only changed her own life but also sparked a wave of positive change throughout the community. Still, there were moments of reflection, reminders that growth was ongoing. During one particularly cold evening, as snowflakes drifted lazily outside their window, the librarian curled up on the couch with a mug of hot chocolate. Her husband joined her, wrapping a blanket around their shoulders. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't faced this?" she asked suddenly. He tilted his head, considering her question. "Maybe we'd still be living our lives the same way," he replied. "But I think we needed this to grow closer to understand what really matters." She smiled faintly, nodding in agreement. Life wasn't perfect, and it likely never would be. But perfection wasn't the goal. It was connection, resilience, and the ability to rise above hardship that defined them. Together, they had proven that even in the face of cruelty, compassion could prevail. And as they sat there surrounded by warmth and love, they knew they were ready for whatever lay ahead. As winter deepened, the town grew quieter, its streets blanketed in snow and its residents retreating indoors to escape the biting chill. Yet, even in the stillness, there was a sense of renewal, a quiet hum of positivity that hadn't existed before. People seemed kinder, more willing to hold doors open or share a smile with strangers. Conversations at the coffee shop and grocery store carried less judgment and more understanding. It was as if the collective weight of what had happened had forced everyone to pause and reflect on their own actions, prompting subtle but meaningful changes. The librarian noticed this shift most acutely during her daily routines. Parents who once barely acknowledged her now greeted her warmly when dropping off their kids for story time at the library. Kids who used to giggle nervously whenever she walked by now ran up to hug her, eager to show off drawings they'd made or books they'd read. Even the firefighters, once symbols of intimidation in her mind, now felt like allies rather than adversaries. Their transformation wasn't overnight. It came through small gestures, a wave from across the street, an apology murmured during chance encounters, or offers to help carry boxes into the library. One snowy afternoon, while shelving books, she overheard two elderly women chatting near the fiction section. One said, "You know, I always thought she was just quiet, But after everything she went through and how she handled it, I have so much respect for her." The other nodded, adding, "She's stronger than any of us realized, and look at how things turned out. Sometimes tough times bring out the best in people." Her cheeks flushed slightly at the compliment, though she didn't let on that she'd heard. Instead, she focused on organizing the shelves, letting the words sink in. For so long, she'd doubted herself, wondering if she truly belonged in this tight-knit community. Now, hearing others speak about her with admiration filled her with a warmth that no amount of hot chocolate could match. She realized then that resilience wasn't just about surviving hardships. It was also about inspiring others to see strength where they least expected it. Her husband, meanwhile, continued using his platform to advocate for kindness and accountability. He traveled across the state delivering speeches at schools, workplaces, and community centers. His message was simple yet powerful. We all make mistakes, but what defines us is how we choose to grow from them. Audiences listened intently, moved not only by his words but also by the personal story behind them. Knowing that he and his wife had faced adversity together gave his message authenticity, making it resonate deeply with listeners. During one such visit to a high school, a teenage girl approached him after his talk. Her hands trembled as she held a crumpled note, tears streaming down her face. "I'm being bullied," she admitted softly. "I didn't think anyone would care, but hearing your story made me feel like maybe I can get through this too." He knelt down to meet her eye level, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone," he told her firmly, "and you deserve to be treated with respect. Don't ever forget that." Moments like these reminded him why their journey mattered, not just for themselves but for everyone watching. Each person who reached out, seeking hope or guidance, reinforced the importance of standing up against cruelty and fostering compassion. Back home, he shared these stories with his wife, knowing they would fuel her determination as much as his own. Together, they celebrated every victory, no matter how small, recognizing that change often started with a single act of courage. At the fire station, the culture continued to evolve. The new leadership prioritized teamwork and mutual support, encouraging firefighters to look out for one another both on and off the job. Monthly meetings included discussions about mental health, emphasizing that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness but a step toward strength. Slowly but surely, camaraderie replaced competition, and trust began to rebuild among the crew. Even the former ringleader of the bullying group found himself embracing the changes. Volunteering at the library had given him a fresh perspective, allowing him to connect with people he'd previously dismissed. Children adored his storytelling sessions, especially when he wove tales of bravery and heroism inspired by real-life rescues. Parents appreciated his efforts to teach fire safety in a way that was engaging and informative. Over time, he stopped, seeing himself as someone defined by past mistakes and instead focused on becoming the person he wanted to be, a role model for others. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the snowy landscape, the librarian decided to take a walk. The air was crisp and the world felt impossibly peaceful. As she strolled past the fire station, she spotted several firefighters shoveling snow from the driveway. They waved when they saw her, calling out cheerful greetings. She smiled and waved back, struck by how far they'd all come since those tense early days. Later that night, sitting by the fireplace with her husband, she reflected on the journey they'd shared. "Do you think we'll ever stop learning from this?" she asked thoughtfully. He chuckled softly, pulling her closer. "Probably not," he replied. "But isn't that a good thing? Every challenge teaches us something new about ourselves and about each other." She nodded, leaning into his embrace. Life wasn't perfect, and challenges undoubtedly lay ahead. Yet they faced them with unwavering determination, knowing they had already overcome the impossible. Their story, a tale of resilience, forgiveness, and growth, had become a beacon of hope for their community. And though the road ahead might twist and turn, they walked it together, hand in hand, ready to inspire and be inspired by the world around them. Spring arrived with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. The snow melted away, revealing green shoots pushing through the soil, signaling a season of renewal. For the town, it felt like more than just a change in weather. It was as if nature itself mirrored the transformation happening within the community. People who had once stood divided now found common ground, working together to rebuild trust and strengthen bonds. The librarian noticed this shift most vividly during the annual spring cleanup event. Every year, residents gathered to tidy up parks, plant trees, and spruce up public spaces. This time, however, something felt different. Instead of sticking to their usual cliques, people mingled freely, sharing laughter and stories. Even the firefighters joined in, rolling up their sleeves to help clear debris from the riverbank. At one point, she spotted the former bully-turned-volunteer lifting heavy logs alongside a group of teenagers. Their teamwork drew applause from bystanders, and for the first time, she saw him smile, not out of arrogance, but genuine pride. Her husband, too, marveled at the progress. During his visits to the capital, he often thought about how much the town had grown. He realized that while policies and programs could guide behavior, true change came from within, from individuals choosing to act with kindness and accountability. Inspired by what he'd witnessed back home, he proposed a statewide initiative called Kindness in Action, aimed at encouraging communities to support one another through volunteerism and open dialogue. When reporters asked him why he was so passionate about the project, he simply said, "Because I've seen firsthand how small acts of compassion can transform lives." Back in the town, life continued to flourish in unexpected ways. The library became a hub of activity, hosting workshops on everything from gardening to storytelling. Kids loved the new Heroes Among Us program, where local figures, firefighters, teachers, even shopkeepers, shared their experiences and advice. The former bully, now a regular volunteer, often spoke about overcoming mistakes and finding purpose. His talks resonated deeply with young listeners, many of whom approached him afterward to thank him for being honest and relatable. One sunny afternoon, as she organized books in the children's section, the librarian overheard a boy whispering to his friend, "I want to be brave like her when I grow up." Her heart swelled with emotion, not because of the compliment, but because she understood the deeper meaning behind it. Courage wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was about showing up, even when things were hard. She hoped that by sharing her story, through actions rather than words, she could inspire others to do the same. Meanwhile, her relationship with her husband deepened in ways neither had anticipated. They weren't just partners anymore. They were teammates navigating life's challenges side by side. On weekends, they took long walks through the woods, talking about everything from childhood memories to future dreams. Sometimes they sat, in silence, content simply to share the moment. Other times they laughed until tears streamed down their faces, reminded of how far they'd come since those dark days of isolation and fear. Their bond didn't go unnoticed. Friends and neighbors often remarked on how strong their marriage seemed, especially after facing such adversity. One evening, during a casual dinner with Lisa, the librarian's closest confidant, the topic came up. "How do you two manage to stay so connected?" Lisa asked curiously. The librarian exchanged a glance with her husband before answering, "We don't take each other for granted. We listen, we support, and we remind ourselves every day how lucky we are to have each other." Lisa nodded thoughtfully, then added with a grin, "And maybe a little bit of stubbornness helps too." Everyone burst into laughter, the mood light and joyful. Moments like these reminded them that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant creating new memories, filled with love and laughter, to balance the pain of the past. As the weeks passed, the town prepared for its biggest celebration of the year, the Spring Festival. Streets were decorated with colorful banners, and vendors set up stalls selling homemade treats and crafts. The library hosted a special booth, offering free bookmarks and storytelling sessions under a canopy of twinkling lights. Families flocked to the event, eager to enjoy music, games, and fireworks. During the festival, the governor made a surprise appearance, drawing cheers from the crowd. Standing on a makeshift stage, he addressed the townspeople, thanking them for their resilience and unity. "This community has taught me something invaluable," he said, his voice steady yet warm. "It's shown me that no matter how tough things get, we can always choose to rise above. Together we've proven that kindness is stronger than cruelty, and hope is more powerful than despair." His words struck a chord, prompting applause that echoed through the square. As he stepped down from the stage, he spotted his wife standing nearby, surrounded by children eagerly showing off their handmade crafts. Watching her interact with them, her face glowing with joy, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This woman, his partner, his rock, had inspired not only him, but an entire town to embrace change and growth. That night, as fireworks lit up the sky, the couple stood hand in hand, taking in the beauty around them. The air buzzed with excitement, and the sound of laughter filled the darkness. For a moment, they allowed themselves to simply exist in the present, soaking in the warmth of connection and belonging. Yet, even amidst the celebration, they knew life would continue to test them. Challenges lay ahead, personal struggles, professional demands, and the inevitable ups and downs of daily living. But they faced them with unwavering determination, knowing they had already overcome the impossible. Their journey, a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the power of love, had become a beacon of hope for everyone around them. And as they stood there, bathed in the glow of fireworks, they felt ready for whatever the future might hold. As summer approached, the town basked in a newfound sense of harmony. The Spring Festival had left its mark, not just as a celebration, but as a reminder of how far they'd come as a community. People who once kept to themselves now greeted each other warmly at the farmer's market or lingered longer during coffee shop chats. Conversations flowed more freely, filled with laughter and shared stories rather than whispered judgments. It was clear that something fundamental had shifted. Not because everything was perfect, but because people were trying, and sometimes trying was enough. The librarian noticed this change most keenly in the little moments. A teenager holding the door open for her at the library, a neighbor stopping by to drop off homemade jam, or even strangers exchanging smiles on the street. These small acts of kindness added up, creating a ripple effect that touched everyone it reached. She often thought about how resilience wasn't just personal, it spread outward, encouraging others to be better too. Her husband saw the same transformation reflected in his work. His Kindness in Action initiative gained traction across the state, inspiring towns and cities to organize their own volunteer projects and community-building events. Letters poured into his office from grateful citizens, sharing stories of neighbors helping one another or workplaces becoming friendlier environments. One letter, written by a young boy, stood out. He described how his classmates had started including him after learning about standing up against bullying. "You made me feel like I matter," the boy wrote simply. Those words stayed with the governor, reminding him why every effort mattered. Back in the town, life carried on with its usual rhythm, though tinged with optimism. The fire station, once a source of tension, became a symbol of unity. Firefighters regularly participated in community events, teaching kids about safety and lending a hand wherever needed. Even the former bully-turned-volunteer found himself embraced by the very people he'd once mocked. During one event, a group of children presented him with a handmade card that read, "Thank you for being brave and changing." Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized how much his actions, and theirs, had transformed the narrative. For the librarian, forgiveness no longer felt like an insurmountable mountain to climb. It came in waves, ebbing and flowing depending on the day. Some mornings she woke up feeling strong, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Other days, old memories crept back in, leaving her momentarily shaken. On those tougher days, she turned to writing, a habit she'd picked up during her healing journey. Filling pages with her thoughts helped her process emotions she couldn't always put into words aloud. Her husband encouraged her to keep going, reminding her that vulnerability was a form of strength, not weakness. One sunny afternoon, while tending to flowers in her garden, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Lisa, her closest friend, carrying a basket of fresh vegetables from her backyard. They sat together under the shade of a tree, chatting about everything and nothing. At one point, Lisa asked softly, "Do you ever think about leaving, starting over somewhere new?" The question caught her off guard, but she didn't hesitate before answering. "No," she said firmly. "This is my home now. Sure, things got hard, but we fought for it, and look where we are today." Lisa smiled, nodding in agreement. "That's what makes you amazing," she said. "Most people would have walked away when things got tough. But you stayed, and you changed things, for yourself and for everyone else." Her words stayed with the librarian long after their visit ended. She realized that staying hadn't been easy. It had required courage, patience, and faith in the possibility of change. Yet looking around at the vibrant town she'd grown to love, she knew it had been worth it. Every challenge, every painful moment had led her here, to a place where she truly belonged. As the months passed, the couple continued finding joy in the simple things: morning walks, quiet evenings by the fireplace, and weekends spent exploring nearby trails. Their relationship remained a cornerstone of strength, built on trust, communication, and mutual support. They celebrated milestones together, big ones like anniversaries, and small ones like finishing a book they both loved. Through it all, they reminded each other that life wasn't about avoiding storms but learning to dance in the rain. By late summer, the town buzzed with preparations for the annual harvest fair. Streets were adorned with orange and yellow banners, and local businesses set up stalls showcasing handmade goods and seasonal treats. The library hosted a storytelling tent, drawing crowds of families eager to hear tales of adventure and hope. Children giggled as the former firefighter turned storyteller animatedly recounted his experiences, weaving humor and heart into every word. Parents watched in awe, marveling at how much he'd changed since those difficult days. During the fair, the governor gave a short speech, thanking the community for its resilience and unity. "This town has taught me that growth doesn't happen overnight," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "It takes time, effort, and a willingness to forgive. Together, we've shown that kindness can heal wounds and bring people closer than ever before." His words resonated deeply, prompting applause that echoed through the square. As he stepped down from the stage, he spotted his wife surrounded by children, reading a story with infectious enthusiasm. Watching her interact with them, her face glowing with happiness, he felt an overwhelming sense of pride. This woman, his partner, his rock, had inspired not only him but an entire town to embrace change and growth. That night, as fireworks lit up the sky, the couple stood hand in hand, taking in the beauty around them. The air buzzed with excitement and the sound of laughter filled the darkness. For a moment, they allowed themselves to simply exist in the present, soaking in the warmth of connection and belonging. Yet even amidst the celebration, they knew life would continue to test them. Challenges lay ahead, personal struggles, professional demands, and the inevitable ups and downs of daily living. But they faced them with unwavering determination, knowing they had already overcome the impossible. Their journey, a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the power of love, had become a beacon of hope for everyone around them. And as they stood there, bathed in the glow of fireworks, they felt ready for whatever the future might hold. In the end, their story wasn't just about surviving adversity, it was about thriving despite it. It was about choosing kindness over cruelty, connection over division, and hope over despair. Together, they proved that even in the darkest moments, light could break through. And when it did, it illuminated not just their lives, but the lives of everyone fortunate enough to witness.